Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I know that I haven't posted in about 6 months, it's been, but I bought a microphone, so hopefully that incentivizes me to make some more videos. And I thought I would just come on here to discuss my April reads as we're nearing the end of the month, and then my May reading plans. And it's been a pretty productive reading month, I would say. I've read 5 books so far, and I'm reading a 6th, which I will also discuss my thoughts on so far. So let's get right into it. The first book that I finished in April was Any Person is the Only Self by Elisa Gabbert. Elisa Gabbert, I don't know. This is a collection of essays, and I love the cover of her just reading slouched over, which I think is very pertinent to the content of this collection. It involves a lot of like meditations during COVID specifically. I believe this was published in 2024. Yes, in 2024. However, the essays were from a few years past. I especially loved her discussion of Fahrenheit 451 and kind of more in like the context of starting a book club with her friends, but focusing only on books that are so canonical. It almost feels like you've read them even when you haven't, which Fahrenheit 451 I feel like is a great example of that. And her opinion on that book, which was pretty negative, almost validated my own opinion of it when I read it because I found it to be deeply unimpressive. So I really resonated with that essay. She also discussed Sylvia Plath at length and the book The Silent Woman by Janet Malcolm, which has been on my TBR for months now, and I really want to get to that. It chronicles her relationship with her husband and just her life and, you know, the events that led to her taking her own life. So I found her perspective on Sylvia Plath really interesting as well. She provides a lot of literary criticism about books that I hadn't necessarily heard of and just different phenomena that I had not previously read about, such as the uncanny child, just the presence of children in literature and what that can mean, and the kind of distortion that comes from recollecting your childhood memories in your adulthood. Overall, I found this to be very interesting, very pertinent to just kind of the state of things post-COVID. I found them to be very easy to read. I would really recommend this if you want something to kind of flex your brain muscles a little bit without doing too much work. I think this was a great essay collection that provided that space for me. The next book that I read was Rouge by Mona Awad. Not to flex, but my copy is signed because she did speak at my school. This book is set in La Jolla, which is where I went to school, so it was very easy to imagine the cliffs that the main character often walks upon to go to the salon or the spa that she falls into. This book is about a woman named Belle whose mother died pretty unexpectedly, and she had a very complicated relationship with her and can kind of source a lot of her own obsession about beauty standards and about just aging and looking young for as long as you can to her mother, who she always compared herself to, as you know, she was raised only by her. She was the only example that she had of kind of what a woman should be, or just like how an adult should behave. So when she moves back to La Jolla to kind of settle her mother's estate, she ends up finding the source of what led to her mother's death and kind of falling into that own trap herself. I found this to be pretty typical of Awad's storytelling. It's kind of allegorical, but there's also certain elements that are very fantastical. You're kind of like, okay, we're stretching the limits of what can be a symbol for something right now. I found it to really pick up in the second half, which in some of her previous novels, I've read 2 other ones, All's Well and Bunny. And in All's Well especially, I found the second half to be a bit of a drag. Rouge, I would say, does continue capturing your attention even as it continues, which is, like I said, kind of a pitfall of this kind of fantastical storytelling that she does. I found it to be very touching how it concludes, her kind of coming to terms with the effect that, or the influence that her mother had on her, that Belle's mother had on her, and connecting that to memories that she previously had suppressed. I think overall it was about the beauty industry, how it can be cult-like, and what it means to really invest yourself in that and succumb to it, as a lot of people have with all of the surgeries that are so common, or the GLP-1s, just everything that people do these days. I would really recommend this. It's very digestible, but it's also, like I said, about these bigger topics that kind of make you rethink our relationship to beauty and the effect that it can have on us, and how it can be generational as well. I read The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. I love this cover. It's very simple, some primary colors. This is about a man named Jack, who may or may not be Ernest himself, living in Paris and taking a sojourn to Spain with his friends, who are all characters, literally and figuratively. This book does start with a warning about the content, because there is some anti-Semitic remarks in this. So if you're considering picking this up, just be warned that there is a lot of stereotyping, a lot of anti-Semitism against one of the characters, and that kind of propels a lot of the other relationships between the characters. So with that in mind, I can't in good faith say this was like a great read. However, what I really did enjoy about it was Brett, the female character. I think she is one of the few multifaceted characters, women characters, that authors at this time in this realm, like the Lost Generation, like Fitzgerald, Hemingway, they tended to not write women with multiplicity. So to read Brett was very refreshing. I found her to be very funny and realistic. I thought that her relationships with the different men in the story were very accurate to the way that a friend group of guys latch on to a woman or two, rely on them to validate their own masculinity and attraction to women, when really there's a lot of undertones in the relationships between the men themselves. I thought it was written very simply. I think it's true Hemingway style. Nothing's superfluous. It's just what is happening, how the characters feel, maybe not even that. There was a certain phrase that has remained with me. That was, they were served buttered toast. Rather, it was bread that was toasted and then buttered. I don't know why that two sentences is just so interesting to me, because they're both necessary in my opinion, but in the Hemingway style. Otherwise that would be like, okay, why are we saying the same thing twice? But we're really not, you know. I would recommend this, but like I said, keep in mind there are anti-Semitic remarks in it, but the characters just feel so real, and it's like we were on the vacation with them, experiencing this festival in this tiny Spanish town, going fishing in the heat. The water's gross and swampy, and there's just random people hanging about who are looking for connection. So I really enjoyed this with, everything in mind. Next, it's a short read. I read McGlue by Ottessa Moshfegh. I'm almost a Moshfegh completist. I just have to read Homesick for Another World. I'm such an avid Moshfegh fan. I think she's a wonderful writer. I think her ideas are so interesting, and she does not shy away from the disturbing, the gross aspects of humanity. And this is one of those examples. This is a very slim read. It's a novella. I believe it was like one of her first, if not her first, published work. This is about a man named McGlue who is an alcoholic, and he is grappling with his accusations that he murdered somebody, his best friend, who he was involved with, in so many words. He's out at sea, he's drinking, he's flashing between these memories of childhood and these different locations that he's been. It feels like one long hazy memory. It just felt so stream of consciousness, not in, there's still, paragraph breaks and dialogue and everything, not like a traditional stream of consciousness novel that is just like blocks of text, but it still felt just so like no breath in between anything happening. I did feel not necessarily confused, but just a little bit like I kind of like came out of the dream when I was done, and I was like, okay, what just happened? I think if I'd maybe taken this a little bit slower, I would have understood it a little bit more, which can be my problem sometimes, where I'm like, I just want to like find out what happens and I miss like the minutia of the story. That is just kind of the nature of novellas too. They're just so short. It's like a roller coaster where it's like that starts off with like a drop or something. It's like all of a sudden you're just like at the high and you don't even know how you got there. I did still enjoy this, and I think it was very atmospheric, and I think her ability to write in perspectives that are like arguably so different from her own, such as writing from the perspective of a man, albeit a man in Salem, Massachusetts in the 1850s, is such a skill and something I really admire about her work. So, last book I finished in April of this year is The Ethics of Ambiguity by Simone de Beauvoir. So this is an introduction to existentialist thought, and she discusses other philosophical perspectives, such as those of Hegel, Sartre, who is her partner, or who was her partner, and Kant, for example. She discusses nihilism and how that still acknowledges existence, so you can't truly be a nihilist while still being human, is what she's arguing. And she discusses the transcendence of existence. She discusses childhood and how that's kind of an objective time in everyone's life. We're so, neuroplastic. We are not immune to any of the external forces around us. They will remain with us in a myriad of ways into adulthood. And that is something no human can outrun, emphasizing how we really are just products of our environment at the end of the day, and there are different ways to approach that, to combat what we have learned. She also discusses aesthetic justification in works, and she argues that in portraying evil, immoral deeds, it can be argued that we are justifying them if we are making them into something beautiful. And she also discusses what freedom truly means and how we are only free or not free in the eyes of other free or not free people. When you are physically and mentally stuck in that situation, it's not really your choice. And overall, she just claims that it is up to us to give our life meaning, to do what we feel is right and what we feel obligated to do. And her last line really stuck with me, and her saying that if we all did what we must, then we would not require imagining a paradise after death where everything is right. I found this to be a good introduction into existentialist thought. It's not a genre that I have particularly dabbled with. I read collections of essays every now and then, but I'm not someone who reads this kind of stuff for fun usually, but I'm trying to start. I have a few other books by some philosophers that I want to get to. So I thought, I love Beauvoir. I've read a few of her other books. I thought this would be, comfortable kind of settling into that genre, and I'm looking forward to reading more about existentialism, surrealism, and just those schools of thought from the mid-20th century. So now I'm going to discuss the book that I'm currently reading, so I won't have too much to say because I'm only on page 54, but I'm currently reading Kathy Acker's Blood and Guts in High School, which was a book that I first learned about during college because one of my professors mentioned her. This is a surrealist fiction piece that blends prose kind of in a play style. It has illustrations. It also has her dream maps, which I thought was really interesting, just kind of seeing the way that her brain works. It is about a teenager. It's semi-autobiographical, based on her relationship with a man named Peter. That's when she wrote it, was during her relationship with him, and she was definitely influenced just by him, coming to terms with teenagehood. I'm still grappling what exactly this is going to be about, right now I'm reading about a bear trying to break into a house. So, and then the next page it says Janie becomes a woman. So excited for that. I do love a kind of weird, subversive story. So this is definitely in that realm. I'm looking forward to continuing this, and hopefully in my next video I'll have more proper thoughts about it. God willing, I make another video. And now I want to discuss my May plans. The next book that I want to get to is Madonna in a Fur Coat by Sabahattin Ali. This is translated from Turkish, and I heard about this just online from a few people that I follow. It is about a man who leaves his home in rural Turkey to learn a trade in Berlin, and he meets a artist through a chance meeting, and I've heard that it's not really a happy love story. It's pretty slim. It's about 200 pages, and I'm just really excited to read something from Turkey. I don't think I've read any Turkish authors before, and I've been there twice, so it's about time I read some of their literature. So this will be my next read. Then this is a book that has been on I take it out every month, and I'm like, this is the month I'm going to get to it, and then I never do. So I'm hoping May is the actual month that I read Chuck Klosterman's The 90s. This was recommended by Anna Wallace Johnson, who is one of my favorite book channels. She is the coolest in my opinion, and I trust her judgment, so I'm hoping this is good. It's about the 90s. I love the cover of this like phone. We just really had something with technology that we have lost. I'm looking forward to just learning about the political landscape of the 90s, the cultural, musical landscape. I feel like I have such a idealized idea of the 90s in my head because when I was growing up on the internet, so were a lot of the 90s kids, but they were the older generation, obviously, and so they were kind of the dominant voice that I would see online, and so I have such a biased opinion of what life was like for them growing up at that time, especially culturally with all the television that they had. It's still seen as this kind of golden age of culture, like pop culture, the music, the fashion, the media that they were able to have access to. That was just the standard versus how things have evolved or arguably devolved since then. And I think this will really coincide with that opinion and maybe reinforce the bias that I have about how cool the 90s is, or it will go against it. And I'm looking forward to finally getting to this. I know Anna Wallace Johnson mentioned it in a more recent video about how it was just a quick read, that it just keeps you, engaged. So I'm excited to pick this up finally, hopefully in May. Next, I want to get to Beware of Pity by Stefan Zweig. I love the NYRB covers and spines. I think they're just so sleek. I love the box. It's just stunning. This is a painting by Egon Schiele called The Artist's Sister Melanie. So there she is. This is a singular moment that leads to a snowball of other things that make you beware of pity, I suppose. According to the back, it's about a cavalry officer named Hoffmiller who attends a soiree, a party, and he invites a woman to dance, but finds out that she is disabled, and it is referred to as a minor blunder that will destroy his life as pity and guilt gradually implicate him in a well-meaning but tragically wrong-headed plot to restore the unhappy invalid to health. I'm curious how that singular moment leads to destroying his life and making him arguably a worse person. It's kind of hard to go wrong with NYRB books. So I'm really excited to read this. I think it will devastate me a little bit, but that's okay. that is good sometimes. Next, I want to read Kazuo Ishiguro's Remains of the Day. It is one that is like staring at me on my shelf, and I really want to get to it. It is about a butler who is reflecting on his 30 years of service for a great gentleman, in quotes, a great gentleman. He begins to question whether that gentleman was so great, kind of reflecting on the things that he saw, the actions that he did in service to this man when it was justified because of a myriad of different reasons. This is heralded as one of his best works. It was discussed at length in one of my college classes, and I felt a bit left out because I hadn't read it, so I definitely want to get to this. Okay, lastly, because I've been talking for quite a bit, I want to read Asaji Stories by Quo Lee Driscoll. It's about Two-Spirit Memory and the Cherokee Queer. This is something I picked up at a local bookstore here in San Diego, and it is about those in Indigenous communities who are neither a man nor a woman. They kind of fall into this third space, and Asaji translate as strange, but in Cherokee it is also a term similar to queer. It's a way to kind of re-examine the Cherokee history, which has been, especially like with these kind of two-spirit people who did not fit into the binary of heteropatriarchy, as it says on the back. And it's such an important part of Indigenous history that I really want to learn more about. This is kind of my educational read for the month. I kind of like to throw one or two in there. I guess the 90s could arguably be an educational book as well. Well, this one kind of just feels more, like I need to be taking notes. And it draws from oral histories and archival documents, which is just right up my alley. Especially with archive, I love to engage in that medium. It mentions it wants to seek social justice for all within these Indigenous communities, and I'm excited to learn more about this, especially as I do live on Indigenous land. Most of us here in the United States do, so definitely want to be more educated on Indigenous history. That's all from me. Thank you for listening. I hope it was enjoyable with my microphone, that I am glad. I just see all these YouTubers having this microphone, so I'm like, I want to be a part of that. And I hope to continue making more videos. I want to make it a priority. Thank you for listening and for being here with me while I, go through these growing pains of learning how to make captivating videos for you all. As always, if you have read any of these books that I talked about, or if you are curious about any of them, I would really love to hear your opinions. If there's also one on my to be read in May list that you have read, I would love to know your opinion, especially whether or not I'm wasting my time reading it or if it will change my life. I hope you enjoyed listening to me, and I hope to talk to you soon.